The strength and resilience of Black families have been tested throughout history. But a recent statement by Republican Byron Donalds has ignited a contentious discussion. After watching, Al Sharpton continues the lie on Rep. Byron Donalds but had no smoke for anti-Black Governor Kathy Hochul by Philip Scott podcast, I was inspired to create my own video on the topic. In fairness to Rep. Byron Donalds, he did not say that Black people were better off during the Jim Crow era. He stated that families were more together. However, any reference to Jim Crow and the Black family is highly sensitive and inappropriate. It is important to recognize that Black families were more together because they were acutely aware of their oppression, more so than today. Now let's listen to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries on the topic.
Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries responded to comments made by Republican Representative Byron Donalds about Black families being more together during the Jim Crow era. That claim from Representative Donalds came as he was speaking about being a father to his children and sharing his thoughts on the Black middle class in America at a voter outreach event in Philadelphia.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that Black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when Black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. I yield back.
Were Black families truly more together under the oppressive Jim Crow laws than they are in the present day? Join us as we delve into this complex and thought-provoking question, exploring the factors that have shaped Black family dynamics over time. Greetings and welcome. I'm Carolyn A. from GettingToTheRoots.com. Here, we're all about uncovering and celebrating your unique family history. Together, we'll explore and honor the stories that define us. Let's dive in. Understanding the Jim Crow era and Black Code laws. The Jim Crow era was a period in American history that lasted from the late 19th century until the mid-20th century. The precise years may vary depending on the historical context and the specific laws and practices in different states. However, the core years of the Jim Crow era are generally considered to be from the 1870s to the 1960s. The Jim Crow era was marked by racial segregation and oppressive laws. These laws institutionalized a system of profound inequality and discrimination against Black people in the United States. Public facilities, schools, transportation, and even neighborhoods were segregated by law, enforcing a separate but equal doctrine, in practice, was anything but equal. During this period, Black people faced severe restrictions on their rights and freedoms. Voting rights were systematically suppressed through poll taxes, literacy tests, and outright intimidation. Today, Black voters continue to face challenges such as strict voter ID laws, gerrymandering, and reduced polling places in predominantly Black neighborhoods, and purges of voter rolls, all of which serve to disenfranchise and marginalize Black communities. Economic opportunities were limited, as Black workers were often relegated to low-paying, menial jobs and faced discrimination in hiring practices. Black Code laws, which were similar to Jim Crow laws, also existed during this time. These laws were initially enacted in the Southern states after the Civil War during Reconstruction. They aimed to control the labor and behavior of formerly enslaved people and to maintain a labor force subservient to white landowners and employers. These laws restricted black people's freedom of movement, their right to own property, and their ability to testify against white people in court. Under these oppressive conditions, black families had to navigate a landscape filled with systemic barriers designed to limit their social and economic mobility. Despite these challenges, black communities often exhibited remarkable resilience and solidarity. Families and communities came together to support one another, creating networks of mutual aid and cooperation that were essential for survival. To gain a deeper understanding, I invite you to watch The Hidden Side of Jim Crow Laws, Discover More, and Labor Trap: How Black Code Laws Enforced New Forms of Slavery. These videos provide an in-depth overview of the legal and social frameworks that shaped the lives of black families during these periods. By exploring these historical contexts, we can better understand how these systemic oppressions impacted the cohesion and resilience of black families. This sets the stage for the complex discussion of whether black families were more united during the Jim Crow era than they are today. Unspoken laws and modern-day discrimination. While the legal framework of Jim Crow has been dismantled, the legacy of this era continues to impact black families today. Although overt segregation is no longer legal, black Americans still face various forms of discrimination and systemic barriers that affect their daily lives and long-term opportunities. One of the most significant challenges faced by black families today is housing discrimination. The practice of redlining, which dates back to the 1930s, has had a lasting impact on black communities. Redlining refers to the systematic denial of services, such as mortgages and insurance, to residents of certain areas based on their race or ethnicity. This practice has led to the concentration of black families in underserved neighborhoods, often with limited access to quality education, healthcare, and job opportunities. Despite laws prohibiting housing discrimination, studies have shown that black Americans still face higher rates of mortgage denials and are more likely to be steered towards less desirable neighborhoods. When black homeowners seek to sell their properties, they often encounter a significant hurdle. Their homes are frequently undervalued compared to similar homes owned by white families. This phenomenon, known as appraisal discrimination, has been well documented in recent years. Studies have shown that homes in predominantly black neighborhoods are consistently appraised at lower values than those in predominantly white neighborhoods. In the workplace, black Americans continue to face discrimination and unequal treatment. Research has shown that job applicants with black-sounding names are less likely to receive callbacks than those with white-sounding names, even when their qualifications are identical. Once employed, black workers often face a hostile or unwelcoming work environment, with microaggressions, unequal pay, and limited opportunities for advancement. These barriers can make it difficult for black families to achieve financial stability and build generational wealth. Education is another area where black students face significant challenges. While segregation in public schools is no longer legal, the legacy of underfunded and under-resourced schools in predominantly black neighborhoods persists. Black students are more likely to attend schools with fewer resources, less experienced teachers, and limited access to advanced courses. In higher education, black students often face discrimination in the admissions process and may struggle to find a sense of belonging on predominantly white campuses. These educational disparities can limit the opportunities available to black students and, in turn, affect the economic and social mobility of black families. The healthcare system also reflects deep-seated inequities. Black Americans face higher rates of chronic diseases, lower access to quality healthcare, and disparities in treatment outcomes. These health disparities are exacerbated by social determinants such as housing, employment, and education. Discrimination within the criminal justice system remains a significant barrier. Black individuals are disproportionately targeted by police, receive harsher sentences, and are more likely to be incarcerated compared to their white counterparts. The unspoken laws and systemic barriers faced by Black families today may not be as overt as the Jim Crow laws of the past, but their impact is no less significant. To understand the full scope of income disparities, I invite you to watch Uncovering Wealth Disparities in Black America. The destruction of Black families began long before Jim Crow, dating back to the Atlantic slave trade. For more insight, watch our video, Dark Secrets of the Atlantic Slave Trade Finally Exposed. Slavery, discriminatory laws, and systemic racism have continuously attacked Black family structures. Comparing injustices then and now reveals both similarities and differences in the struggles faced. During the era of slavery, Black families were torn apart as family members were sold to different plantations for 400 years. The forcible separation of families was a common practice, designed to break the spirit of enslaved people and maintain control over them. This early assault on Black families laid the foundation for the ongoing challenges they would face. In 1940, the percentage of Black children born to unmarried mothers was around 14%, compared to nearly 70% in recent years. However, it is important to note that this relative stability was not necessarily a result of better conditions, but rather a reflection of the societal pressures and limited options available to Black families at the time. The rise in Black family separation and single parenthood in the latter half of the 20th century has been attributed to various factors, including the welfare policies, the war on drugs, and the mass incarceration. Some argue that welfare programs created incentives for single parenthood, which is debatable, while others point to the disproportionate impact of the criminal justice system on Black families, particularly the high incarceration rates of Black men. It is important to recognize that the challenges faced by Black families are not unique to their race. Family separation and divorce rates have increased across all racial groups in the United States over the past century. However, the historical context of slavery, Jim Crow, and ongoing systemic racism has placed additional burdens on Black families. In 1960, the divorce rate for white families was 2.8%, compared to 5.4% for Black families. By 2015, the divorce rate for white families had risen to 16%, while the rate for Black families was approximately 32%. These statistics highlight the growing instability of all families, but also the persistent disparities between Black and white families. The pros of family stability during the Jim Crow era included a sense of community and shared struggle, which fostered resilience and support networks. However, the cons were numerous, including the constant threat of violence, limited economic opportunities, and the psychological toll of living under oppressive conditions. Today, Black families continue to face challenges rooted in the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, as well as ongoing systemic racism. The marriage rate among Black Americans has declined significantly since the 1960s, with only 30% of Black adults married in 2020 compared to 56% of white adults. Divorce rates have increased across all racial groups, but Black couples have consistently higher rates compared to white couples. A significant proportion of Black children, 55%, live in single-parent households, compared to 21% of white children. Hispanic families also face challenges, with 31% of children living in single-parent households. Asian families tend to have the highest rate of two-parent households, with about 85% of children living with both parents. Around 49% of Native American children live in two-parent households. Approximately 80% of Middle Eastern children live in two-parent households. Historical trauma. The legacy of slavery and ongoing racial discrimination has created a deep-seated trauma that can manifest in unhealthy relationship patterns and intergenerational challenges. Were all families more together then? The notion that all families were more together in the past is a romanticized view. While divorce rates were lower in previous generations, this does not necessarily indicate greater family togetherness. Family structures have evolved over time, and the challenges faced by families today are different from those in the past, but the fight for equality continues. The political landscape and Black representation. The political landscape in the United States has evolved over time, but the need for genuine representation and advocacy for the Black community remains as pressing as ever. Neither the Democratic nor the Republican Party has consistently prioritized the interests of Black Americans, as evidenced by the lack of comprehensive reparations and the persistence of systemic inequalities. Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, particularly during the era of Jim Crow, was associated with the Southern states and supported segregationist policies. However, this began to change in the mid-20th century, particularly during the Civil Rights Movement. Today, the Democratic Party generally advocates for civil rights, social justice, and policies aimed at reducing inequality. They support measures like affirmative action, police reform, and expanded access to health care and education. Republican Party. The Republican Party was founded on anti-slavery principles and was the party of Abraham Lincoln. However, in the late 20th century, the party shifted towards a platform that appealed more to conservative and Southern voters, often opposing affirmative action and other policies aimed at addressing racial disparities. Today, the Republican Party emphasizes personal responsibility, limited government, and free market principles. They often argue against policies they view as preferential treatment based on race, such as affirmative action. Many Black Americans view the Republican Party as indifferent or hostile to their interests, particularly due to its opposition to policies addressing racial inequalities and its perceived lack of engagement with Black communities. Both parties have been criticized for their lack of action on reparations for Black Americans, despite growing advocacy for the issue. Reparations would acknowledge and compensate for the historical injustices of slavery, segregation, and systemic racism. The reluctance to address reparations suggests a deeper issue of prioritizing political gains over justice and equality. For more insight, watch our video. How to prove your lineage for reparation rights. Black leadership and political challenges. True Black representation and leadership in politics face significant challenges, historically. Black leaders who have championed civil rights and systemic change, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Fred Hampton, faced violent opposition, including assassination. This trend of silencing Black voices continues today through character assassination and political marginalization. Some Black leaders may prioritize personal gain or align with broader political interests that do not fully address the needs of Black communities. This can lead to disillusionment and a sense of betrayal among those they represent. Black leaders who fearlessly advocate for their communities often face character assassination attempts or even physical threats. Like the vilification of contemporary figures like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and Congresswoman Maxine Waters. There is a disturbing pattern of silencing and discrediting Black voices that challenge the status quo. This underscores the importance of rallying behind leaders who genuinely prioritize the needs and rights of the Black community. In navigating the complex political landscape, individuals need to look beyond the noise of news outlets and social media. and to connect with their own moral compass. Awareness and discernment are crucial as political landscapes can shift rapidly. And historical precedents show that laws from the Jim Crow and Black Coat eras could potentially resurface. The danger of regressive laws. Recent events have shown that states can enact laws reminiscent of past discriminatory practices. For example, Arizona enacted House Bill 2305, a law from 1864, raising concerns about the potential for other regressive laws to be reinstated, such as those affecting civil rights and voting rights. This underscores the importance of vigilance and advocacy for true equality and justice. The question of whether Black families were more together under Jim Crow or today is complex. While the harsh realities of Jim Crow fostered a strong sense of community and mutual support, the era was marked by severe oppression and systemic racism. Today, despite having civil rights, Black Americans often face subtler forms of discrimination and are still treated like second-class citizens regardless of their contributions to society. The struggle for true equality and unity continues. That's a wrap, history seekers, on Black family togetherness in Jim Crow versus today. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Peace and love.